enter an industry, enter it through the hardest part of the industry. The easiest part, if you attack the easiest part of the industry, which in this context would be mutual funds, it's very hard to build barriers to entry.
Welcome to another episode of Startup Garage. I have one of the most celebrated public markets investors with me on the show today, Saurabh Mukherjee. Saurabh is an author and an entrepreneur. He's the founder and chief investments officer at Marcellus Investments Manager and the former CEO of Ambit Capital. He's also a member of SEBI's Asset Management Advisory Committee and one of the best-selling authors in India with books like Unusual Billionaires and Coffee Can Investing. In this episode, we talk to him about retail investing in India, about cutting through the financial noise, and his love for reading. So, welcome to the show, Saurabh. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been with Ambit Capital for the better part of the decade. You've helped it grow into a phenomenal wealth managing and broking company. And then in 2018, you started Marcellus. So what is the story behind it all? What caused this shift?
I think part of it, honestly, was because of family reasons, right? I think I spent 8 extremely happy and productive years in Ambit. But as the business grew, as my responsibilities grew, the travel load had become quite punishing. 3 out of 5 days, some days, sometimes 4 out of 5 days, I'd be on the road. And my children were getting older, so they're in their early teens now, and I figured that if I didn't spend the next 4 5 years with them, then once they go off to college, then it'll be I'll never see them again in terms of living with them on a daily basis. That was one factor. Say, can I build a life where I can spend more time and if not at home, at least in Mumbai, so that I can see my kids in the morning and in the evening. The other aspect of it was that as I grew into the role at Ambit, as my colleagues there helped me grow into that role, I started yearning for a more difficult challenge. Right, there's not much I can do about this facet of my personality. So every 10-15 years, the urge comes to hit the reset button, challenge yourself again. And whilst, Ambit was an extremely kind employer, and it was a very happy, very productive time. I felt that if I wanted to, challenge myself through my 40s, learn new skills, I needed to get out of my comfort zone. I was getting a little too comfortable. I was getting a little too comfortable in the CEO role at Ambit Capital. So both in terms of from a lifestyle perspective and from a psychological perspective, it felt like the time had come to try building a new business. And I'd done it before. I'd done it at the age of 27. I had become an entrepreneur for the first time. And the company had done reasonably well. We'd got a reasonable exit, and that's how I migrated to India 12 years ago. So I said, look, if I could do it when I was 27, then at the age of 42, with more gray hair, surely I can do a little bit.
Yeah, that's really cool. And also, sort of, I wanted to know more about. So you started this PMS, and were there some revelations that you suddenly, tumbled upon that caused you to start Marcellus? Were there any particular sort of facts that you came across and you saw that market opportunity, and because I'm asking this because Marcellus has a remarkably different approach to investing than most of the other PMSs.
Sure.
What really caused shift towards that side?
So in a way, I think a sequence of events came together. So in 2016, we published Unusual Billionaires, right? And the philosophy Unusual Billionaires of Coffee Can Investing in turn was inspired by my reading Rob Kirby's paper called Coffee Can Investing in 2013. And as I crunched the numbers in India, basis that philosophy, what I found startled me, that if you can use this very simple philosophy created in America 40 years ago, which is the Rob Kirby philosophies by buy a handful of outstanding companies and sit on them for a decade, and you'll make a lot of money. And when I crunched the data for India, it worked spectacularly. And I will elaborated that crunch in Unusual Billionaires. What really startled me was how quickly that book became a bestseller. I think in 12 or 13 days from publication, it became a national bestseller. Penguin, the publisher, and I both were astonished. In fact, it became a bestseller so quickly that by the time we organized the launch event, I remember we'd invited Mr. Vinod Rai, who'd written the former Comptroller General of India, to give the speech at the launch event, and he sort of pulled my leg that this is the first time I'm speaking at the launch event of a book which is already a national bestseller. But that
Wow.
told me that there is real appetite
Mhm.
for this format of investing in India, because all of us tend to get a little cynical with age.
Yeah.
My view was, yeah, I'm writing a book here, but kaun padega, kisko interest hoga? Most people will just carry on doing their
Mhm.
same old, buy sasta stocks and pray to the big man in the sky type of approach of
Yeah.
investing.
Yeah.
So the fact that the book went on to, I think today it's sold in excess of 25,000 copies. That's the legitimate copies. I don't know how many pirated versions have been. So
Yeah.
that could be there's an appetite here. So when I was sort of thinking through, well, what do I do with the rest of my life? How do I do something which gives my family and my colleagues a decent life, but at the same time gives us something interesting to do? My mind went back to the book. The other epiphany I had was, sort of my neighbors, so to speak. So I live in a suburb of Bombay, very conventional suburb,
Mhm.
and I noticed that till 3-4 years ago, none of my neighbors were interested in asking me about stocks. And I've been working in the Indian stock market for the best part of a decade now, longer than that.
Mhm. Okay.
Till 3-4 years ago, my neighbors had no interest. Right, they were happy buying flats in our neighborhood or in Bandra or in Panvel or wherever.
Mhm.
But 3 years ago, they started asking me, "Kya le?" Some of them read The Unusual
Mhm.
Billionaires, some of them read my subsequent book, Coffee Can Investing.
Right.
And that got me thinking, is there a shift happening? Is there a shift happening where affluent Indians
Mhm.
finally abandon their love for real estate and gold and start moving into high quality equities? Um, it was, I think, 2017 or 2018, around the time I left Ambit, the RBI published a brilliant report. It's on the RBI website called the
Mhm.
RBI Household Finance Committee report,
Okay.
right? And that has some stunning data in it. It says that 95% of India's wealth is
Mhm.
in physical assets. It says
Wow.
that no other country in this world has a skew like this, where 95 is physical, only 5% is financial. And it further purports to say that this does not look like a sustainable state of affairs. The RBI uses some euphemisms, but basically the RBI's report says that as the amount of black money in real estate reduces,
Mhm.
you will see Indians shifting from physical to financial. So I did some
Right.
quick back of the envelope numbers, that assuming broadly that India's household wealth is 10 trillion,
Mhm.
if every year just 1% of wealth moves from physical to financial, that's $100 billion move,
Yeah.
right? And I saw in the RBI report and on the SEBI website that the totality of India's financial assets is 500 billion. So I said,
Wow.
was from 1947 to now $500 billion hua hai.
Mhm.
If every year it goes by even 50 billion, not even my 100 billion figure, then in 10 years this market will double. The financial savings market will double. And that's how the sort of business plan thinking started, that we know a little bit about investing in high quality equities.
Right.
We can see a market opportunity. The market opportunity appears massive. Even if we get a small slice of a massive opportunity, we can build a successful business. And then we said, what is the hardest part of this industry to attack? Right, I've always believed that when you enter an industry, enter it through the hardest part of the industry. The easiest part, if you attack the easiest part of the industry, which in this context would be mutual funds, it's
Mhm.
very hard to build barriers to entry. So attack a difficult market and then build barriers to entry around that. And as Peter Thiel explains in 0 to 1, completely monopolize that part of the market. So that was the genesis of the business plan. That was why we
Mhm.
focused on the PMS market, with an average ticket size of 50, 60, 70 lakhs.
Right. Sort of so many questions come to my mind, but I have to start with this. So the average, so I was reading your book Unusual Billionaires, and I went on to listen to a few of the talks that you give, and then I was just researching on the internet, and I found out that the average holding time for a stock
Yeah,
is shorter than at any time since the 1920s, and this is globally, right? So
yeah.
people are becoming less and less patient with financial securities, and so
Yeah.
I want to know what is causing this trend. There is this whole gamut of financial reporting that goes on, that causes changes in investor sentiments,
Yeah.
but overall, what do you think is the cause for this trend?
So I think it's a variety of things, right? Firstly, the easy access of financial data, where say even a person, a high net worth person sitting in my building
Hmm.
can subscribe to pretty sophisticated financial database. Say,
Right.
I think the low end Reuters service is a few lakhs,
Hmm.
right? And the low end Reuters service is a full on data service, right?
Hmm.
It'll pretty much tell you everything you need to know for stocks and bonds around the world. So the reduction in accessing data, the rise in broadband speeds, which makes it possible for people to sit at homes or in small offices or in serviced offices and access through high speed data connections the world's information.
Hmm.
The second is the inability of people to now read, right? So attention spans have been destroyed by social media, WhatsApp, text messaging, the mobile phone generation. So
Yeah.
forget reading books. People struggle to read an annual report. So if you can't read books or annual reports, obviously you'll react to news, and the world that churns out news also understands that people have short attention spans. So the news becomes very centered around generating action.
Hmm.
So your accessibility to news, your accessibility to data is improved, and your propensity, your vulnerability, your propensity to react to news and data has increased, and
Hmm.
you therefore end up with this current situation where people are trading in and out. Now, in a highly liquid market like the United States,
Hmm.
uh, it's all right. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world in a market like United States.
Right.
But
Right.
we are amongst the least liquid. We are amongst the least liquid of the world's top 10 stock markets. So in our country, you trade in and out. You're basically paying for your stockbroker's Mercedes S class, and obviously he'll be very happy.
Yeah.
But you're handing over your wealth to him. Remember, there's also the small matter of 15% short-term capital gains tax.
Yeah.
So in a way, that constituency in our country, and by the way, this is not just retail investors, right? There's this bizarre notion that we're talking about just Robin Hood investors, but institutional investors in India also invest like this. So that gives people like us a vulnerable constituency to prey upon.
Right.
People who don't read,
Mhm.
people who don't dive deep, and they are basically the alpha generators for people like us who
Right.
do the reverse. In a given year, in our typical Marcellus portfolio, in a given year we might buy one or two stocks and sell one or two stocks, 5% churn, right? So in effect, our patience is complementary to the impatience of the
Mhm.
typical investor, and our ability to read 10-15 years annual reports is
Mhm.
allied to our patience. The typical investor, as I said, forget about reading a year, forget 10-15 years of annual reports. If he can read 1 year of annual reports, that will be an outstanding achievement. But he doesn't even do that. He reacts to news flow, and that gives people like us the ability to generate the returns that are highlighted in Unusual Billionaires and Coffee Can Investing, those two books.
Right. So, sort of coming to, so you mentioned there is this habit of people where they rely more on news than the actual fundamentals of a business or the financial performance of the business itself, right? And you have emphasized a lot on reading. I mean, also in your other talks that I've heard. So when everyone is basing their investment on an yearly 3 year 5 year horizon, you are essentially making people see a 10-year horizon, right? And you're doing it by cutting out the noise, you say. So how helpful has reading been? How do you sort of cut that noise out? How do you stay focused on this path by making sure that all these news do not affect you and your investors as well. So how does that reading link to your style of investing?
So in a way, I think, we're all human beings, right? And we're all basically, our behaviors are the result of the 5 people, 6 people, perhaps 10 people we interact with on a
Yeah,
most frequent basis, right?
yeah, yeah.
So therefore, whatever behaviors you seek, right? And I like reading, but hey, maybe that's not the greatest virtue. Maybe there are other desirable character traits. Whatever character trait you are seeking, you should surround yourself with people who have that character trait.
Mhm.
So if you want to become a fitness fanatic, and you believe health and fitness is how nirvana is attained, then obviously you should surround yourself with other fitness fanatics other than people
Yeah,
eating hamburgers and drinking aerated drinks all day long, right?
yeah, yeah.
So in our context, I think what's happened is, since we've worked together, the core group that populates Marcellus, I think the three eldest of us have worked together for 16 years. And if I sort of broaden the circle to another 6 of us, we worked together for 10 years. And even the youngsters have worked with me for 5, 6 years. So what happens over time, therefore, is a degree of self-selection. A degree of self-selection.
Mhm.
People who don't like to read, people who want fatafat dhanadhan action,
Mhm.
they migrate away from our type of people, and they go to
Okay.
others who are birds of a feather flock together. But the benefit is, because the core group has sort of worked together for 10 to 16 years, we are very similar to each other in our reading habits. Our views on life are very different. Our views on investing are also very different, which is good. We need diversity of views.
Yeah.
But our habits on reading, on reflection, on deep thought are similar. And that's why I think we've been able to hang together.
Right.
Then you recruit basis this characteristic.
Mhm.
So you when you recruit people, you don't really ask them, आज Nifty कहाँ पे है और P multiple Nifty का क्या है. These are useless bits of information. Right? I
Mhm.
remember actually when I was interviewing in college,
Mhm.
one guy from a Swiss investment bank asked me,
Mhm.
and this was in the UK. He said, where is the FTSE at? And I remember saying, how does it matter? And obviously I didn't get it. Right? So anyway, coming back to the matter at hand, when we interview people, we give them pretty punchy, deep case studies to work on.
Yeah.
Often we give them a big fat annual report, and we say, we'll leave you in this room for a couple of hours. This is the annual report. When we come back, you'll take us through your key observations on accounting quality in the annual report.
Right.
So, sometimes we come back and we say the fellow is completely disintegrated. He's never sat still for 2 hours in his life, and you sort of politely thank him or her for her time. But sometimes you find enormously bright people, and we've been very fortunate in that regard. I think
Mhm.
the Indian CA community, the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst community,
Mhm.
is throwing out some spectacular talent, and
Yeah.
and those guys have then got self-selected.
Right.
Similarly, with our clients as well, our point to them is, why are you giving us your money? Right? Our books are free, our books are available on Amazon
Mhm.
for 250, 300 rupees. If you don't want to pay for it, you can download the pirated copy free of charge. Right? So don't give us your money, don't pay us fees. Just go and read our books. Right?
Yeah.
And we don't have any exit load, we don't have any entry load. So people who are flustered by COVID, who are flustered by stock chad gaya abhi bech dete hain, they do their own thing and they migrate. Every month we do webinars, every week we do blogs and newsletters. Clients who read and understand what we do stay.
Mhm.
Others go elsewhere, and give their money to other high frequency joes, and that's fine. That's all right as well. So you
Yeah.
sort of make comfort, you make peace with who you are,
Mhm.
what you stand for, and
Mhm.
over time the ecosystem around you coalesces like that. And I've seen this with promoters and listed entities as well. That's
Exactly.
very important. Therefore, it's very important to find out for a typical listed entity promoter, उसके 5 करीबी के दोस्त कौन है,
Right.
right? And
Right.
if the 5 closest friends are high rollers from Dubai, then your dude in India is unlikely to be compounding for you.
That's a red flag right there.
Absolutely.
And also, sort of, one very interesting thing is, so when you read through Unusual Billionaires, you see that all these companies that you say are continuous compounders, constant compounders, they
Mhm.
also have this immense amount of focus on their core business, right? And I see that same thing happening
Mm.
within Marcellus as well. I mean, you're so focused internally on what exactly it is that you want to do, that are attracting similar kinds of employees, you're attracting similar kinds of clients, which is brilliant.
So I don't know. I mean, it's a good point you make. You're right. You're right. That again, it sort of goes back to that birds of a feather ecosystem. So
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happens, I suppose, is what happens with people like us is we like reading, we like going deep.
Mhm.
So even in our even in our operations team,
Yeah.
we are one of the largest users of Salesforce in the country. So even there, the analytics are going very deep,
Right.
right? And our head of operations, Manish Hemnani, he's driving an incredibly deep analytical process
Mhm.
as to how to improve the efficiency of our operation. So we've
Right.
ended up getting a more new business flow than any PMS in the history of mankind, probably,
Wow.
which gives you a sense of how useless our business forecasting 2 years ago was. But anyway, because of that, we've had to last 12 months, we've had to completely rethink through how
Yeah.
should PMS operations function, right?
Right.
What can we digitize? What can we outsource?
Mhm.
How can we streamline our own operations into
Mhm.
a process where turnaround time, where TAT is reduced, right?
Right.
What is the best way of measuring TAT? How
Mhm.
can we incentivize the distributors to be productive rather than just throwing
Mhm.
half-filled forms at us? So I suppose since every sort of facet of the business, everybody who's self-selected into Marcellus
Mhm.
has a desire for detail and a love for detail, it sort of
Right.
lends itself to going deep and trying to do the best job we can with whatever resources, with the modest resources we have.
Right.
And
Right.
my constant exhortation to uh, people is, we're not here to do something danadan fatafat.
Mhm.
10-20 साल
Yeah.
लगेगा बनाने में. We will do, as long, it will take as long as it takes. But our
Yeah.
job is to do the best job we can with whatever modest resources we have.
That's true. That's true. No, absolutely. And I think this goes back to, because when I was an entrepreneur, and this has been fed to the new generation all
Mm.
the time, that when you're starting up something, you need to move really fast. You need to break things and need to experiment and fail faster, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is not, it's not a one size fits all game. I mean,
Yeah. So
um,
I think there's a very interesting point you raise here, right? What happens to a lot of people in our countries? They read American books on
yeah,
finance,
yeah, yeah,
right, or on angel investing, and they copy paste that in India, right?
exactly.
Now, in a country like the US, where cost of capital is somewhere around zero to, say, even for equity capital, the cost of capital is somewhere between 0 to 5%, right? Where infrastructure is good, labor markets are liquid. You can do your move fast, break things, and get
Mhm.
successful or whatever.
Yeah.
You try doing that in India, no, with your money or with somebody else's money, where equity cost of capital for a chota business is 25%.
Mhm.
You'll be, you'll be in a very sticky situation.
Mhm.
So our labor markets are not liquid. We have a talent pool is very shallow in terms of building up a high quality company
Yeah.
across all disciplines.
Yeah.
So both human talent, human capital, and financial capital in India is scarce, and therefore you have to harness it. You have to nurture it. You have to be careful with your planning, and you have to be careful with your deployment of talent and money,
Right.
because there isn't an abundance, contrary to popular perception, there isn't an abundance of money and talent in our country.
Yeah.
But if you nurture it well, the opportunities in India
Mhm.
are enormous.
Right, right, right. And also, I think sort of what you mentioned, I mean, people read all kinds of investing books also. So a lot of people quote Benjamin Graham,
Hmm.
Intelligent Investor, and then they pick up
Right.
investing at a fair price or below fair
Yeah,
price.
yeah,
Always like an approximation. If one can judge that, they can make
yeah.
money. So do you believe this is an ideal practice? Do you believe this fits into the Indian markets as well? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think the academics in our country, right? So you can't really blame US business schools for teaching CAPM and Benjamin Graham, right? Because
Yeah.
those theories were built for their market and they work
Yeah.
to a decent amount, right?
Yeah.
CAPM in America works to a reasonable extent, right?
Hmm.
But I think Indian academics really need to introspect, right? And Indians who are studying courses like CFA, including myself, we
Hmm.
really need to ask ourselves: does CAPM or efficient markets theory really work in India?
Hmm.
So just like to quickly explore two facets of it.
Hmm.
CAPM assumes, right? The American academics who created CAPM, They were very clear in saying CAPM has several assumptions, including low transaction costs and no taxes.
Right.
Now, you and I know 15% short-term capital gains tax hai, right? Even on a nifty stock for a large investor, transaction cost plus price impact cost is 0.4%, entry cost or exit cost, right? So immediately the CAPM's basic precondition is violated. Secondly, CAPM assumes that there are no information asymmetries, right? Now, you got to be out of your mind to believe that the Indian stock market does not have asymmetries, right? Now, that's it. So theoretically, CAPM doesn't work. Now, practically, look at the last 20 years, right? There's an inverse correlation over 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 years. There's an inverse correlation between beta and returns. Higher beta in India has given you lower returns, right? There's an inverse correlation between volatility and returns. Higher volatility has given you low returns.
Correct.
CAPM neither works in theory nor in practice, but all the bacha log between ages 18 to 22 and they're kind of complete masoom wala age, and they're complete masoom bacha, they're they're fed this stuff, and they unthinkingly adopt it, and they go on to make investments which cost their clients a lot of money. So I reckon a whole generation of Indians' wealth has been wiped out by the misguided application of Western finance theory in the Indian context.
That's true. That's true. I mean, even at B schools, you're taught CAPM. You're given all these assumptions of fair markets, efficient markets, and then when you go out in the real world, you go and realize that there is no such benchmark like a CAPM, right? I mean, you have to figure out all these rates, all these risks yourself, and that is when reality hits you. So Saurabh, my next question is around how do you particularly analyze business fundamentals? And you have, yes, I've read your Unusual Millionaires, and I noticed that there is a common thread across the companies that you have talked about. I mean, although they have been consistent in their revenue growth, they have been consistent in their ROCE. But other than that, what are the fundamental things that you look for when you pick up a stock?
So there's three things that we try to do. The first one is the cleanliness aspect. Is the promoter stealing money? So there's a whole the team is stuffed full of chartered accountants and chartered financial analysts, and they apply our forensic algorithms on the promoter. There are different algorithms for financial services stocks and non-financial services stocks, and typically we find 70-80% of companies fail the forensics themselves, right? So that's the first layer of work that we do. The second layer is establishing, is this product or service, is this a basic essential in our country? Because, most of us have figured out that our country has 1 billion plus people living on, say, $1,000 a year, $1,000 a year or less, right? And therefore, if you really want to build a robust portfolio, you got to focus on companies that are catering to this 1 billion plus Indians living on $1,000 a year or less. You're looking for basic essential products, baby milk powder, undergarments, Hawaii chappals, blood test, motor insurance, basic stuff, essential stuff. And the third thing, the most time-consuming aspect of it, the stuff which sometimes ends up taking 2 years of research per company, is the barriers to entry, right? We look for companies whose barriers to entry are higher than Mount Everest. And sometimes it takes us 2 years to figure out. So in Unusual Billionaires, you would have read the Asian Paints chapter 2. That took us the best part of 2 years to write that chapter.
Wow.
Because to figure out Asian Paints' monopoly, and this is something later on we read Peter Thiel's book on, just explaining it clearly. There is no great monopolist anywhere in the world will tell you that he's got a monopoly. He will pretend that he's competing, right? And the fellow who's not a monopolist, who's got no sort of franchise, he will try to pretend he's got some special barrier to entry, some competitive advantage. So with all the great franchises, I would say that India, BSE 500 will have roughly 20 great franchises, of which 14 sit in our portfolio. But with all the great franchises, it takes anywhere between 6 months, if you're fortunate, and as long as 2 years to figure out the barrier to entry. And the promoter or CEO will never help you figure it out.
Right.
And neither should he. To be honest, if I was in his place, why would I blab it out to a fund manager or a broker? कि मेरी barrier to entry XYZ है.
Yeah, I mean that's like inviting the competition commission to your gates. And also, I think in 0 to 1 also, Peter Thiel mentions that Amazon still calls itself an e-commerce company, Google calls itself a search
Yeah.
company. So yeah.
Yeah.
So, sort of my next question is, so you talked about picking companies from three perspectives, where you talk about promoters, you talk about barriers to entry, but how does sector diversification fit as a filter, if there is any?
So we've never really killed ourselves on sector diversification, right? Two reasons for that.
Okay.
Right. First is, I'm not running some sort of charity. I've got no need to invest in sectors. Marcellus has no need to invest in sectors which don't have companies which can generate a return on capital above cost of capital. So if the infrastructure sector doesn't have a single company which can't generate ROC in excess of cost of capital, then so be it, right? We won't invest in it. Ditto for real estate or for airlines or for telecom, right? There are other, braver souls who can figure out how to make money here. We can't figure out how to make money in sectors where no promoter can generate a ROC above cost of capital. Right. Secondly, as finance theory itself shows, by the time you hit 13, 14, 15 stocks, you've got the diversification you need. So basis the algorithms described in our books and basis the more practical granular work that we do on barriers to entry, we end up with 13, 14, 15 stocks. So we get the diversification we need. There's no need to over diversify. We're not here to run an index fund or an ETF which has a representation from every part of the market. Our job is to choose 13, 14, 15 clean, well-run companies with massive barriers to entry, and we can make money quietly on the back of that.
Right. So, Saurabh, like you mentioned, there is, I mean, that's a good part about being a PMS and not being an AMC, right? You get to pick your stocks, you get to keep it without
I think to be fair, I think an AMC can also do that, no?
Okay.
So you can have a 20 stock mutual fund and nobody's stopping you. So I think if you see Axis Mutual Fund, they've done a decent job in this regard. So I think they've got a focus 20 or 25. I think they've got a pretty focused portfolio. Numbers are pretty decent as well. You can find the numbers on say Money Control or Value Research. They've done a good job. And I sit on the SEBI Mutual Fund Advisory Committee. And in the context of the rules the regulator has set, you can build focused portfolios. Now, Axis' success shows that the public also buys these things, right? They've done very well on the back of these focused mutual funds, equity mutual funds that they've run. The question then becomes, why haven't more people done it? And I think the answer goes back to the theme which you began your discussion, right? Investors struggle to concentrate. They struggle to build the courage of their convictions. They flow with their convictions ebb and flow with whatever is the flavor of the day. And as a result, they building these hodgepodge portfolios of 50, 60, 70 stocks, which are basically index trackers masquerading as actively managed funds. And in coffee car investing, I think pages 84, 85, we've shown this point that the 97% of large cap mutual funds in our country struggle to show any evidence of tangible outperformance vis-a-vis the benchmark.
Yeah. That's true. And I mean, this reminds me of one quote by Philip Fisher, who he said that the stock market has people who know the price of everything but the value of nothing, right? So everyone is so focused on buying in at the right price, buy when the price is lower than the fair market value, that they forget the actual real value of the business that the stock is based upon, right? So I think that is probably one of the reasons, and then it gets back again to some sort of investor education in the whole country. So sort of my question is, do you think this level of investor education and this behavior in retail investing in India, will this cause shift towards fixed income securities, or will this cause a shift towards more value added services in terms of say robo advisory or say small ticket PMS?
So look, my 10 cents on this is we can already see what this will do, I think. So for mass affluent or middle class investors who can't afford the 50 lakhs ticket size
Right.
of a PMS or 1 crore ticket size of an AIF,
Right.
I think they will gravitate over time towards low cost tracker funds, index funds, right? And
Okay.
most Indian fund houses now offer these. They don't
Right.
publicize it because they're terrified of cannibalizing their own actively managed mutual funds. But over time, the bulk of the middle class will realize that effectively I'm paying active management fees
Yeah.
for a tracker fund. Why am I doing it? Let me move to a tracker fund or an index fund. So that'll be the mass aff middle class migration.
Mm-hmm.
And then the family offices, more affluent people who can afford the 50 lakhs, 1 crore, 2 crore tickets,
Yeah.
they will migrate towards the PMS AIF offering,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll have performance fees and low fixed fees. For example, in our consistent compounder portfolio, we give clients a choice of zero fixed fees, and we
Okay.
get paid entirely on performance and so on.
Right.
So I think the market will bifurcate. The middle class, those who can't afford the bigger tickets, will go to index and tracker,
Mm-hmm.
and then those who can afford it, family offices, affluent people, they
Mm-hmm.
will move to PMS AIF, and you've already seen that, right? Explosive
Yeah.
growth in PMS AIF for the last 4-5 years, where from nothing 7-8 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
PMS plus AIF is comfortably north of I think 150,000 crores of assets.
That's true. That's true. Sort of, does social media play some sort of role in this? Because there are so many new fintech companies in the wealth management space now. Uh, they are assisting small ticket investors either move to, like you said, sort of an actively managed fund. They are assisting small ticket investors invest into a bunch of stocks that have shown a consistent past performance, and robo advisory is coming up big time. So within the fintech trends, do you see something becoming a bigger trend in the coming years in terms of wealth tech?
So I think this is another mindless application of American uh, uh, logic to India, right? So if you see, right, there's two challenges here.
Mhm.
In our country, you don't know which provider to trust,
Okay.
right? Who's the next Karvi? Who's the next ILFS? Who's the
Yeah.
next PMC bank?
Mhm.
Who's the next Global Trust Bank? None of us have any idea.
That's true.
So in a country where levels of trust is low in institutions,
Mhm.
I find it hard to believe that
Mhm.
uh, middle class people or conservative H&Ws
Mhm.
will entrust their money to fintech and robo advisory. I think it's a sort of ख्याल अच्छा है.
Mhm.
ख्याल अच्छा है. कितना practical है, I'm not so sure, right? That's the first challenge, right? We still haven't built such a robust ecosystem
Mhm.
where you and I will, at the click of our mouse, a click of our mobile phone,
Mhm.
trust lakhs of our money with with
Mhm.
a with a financial services provider.
Okay.
The second challenge is the inequality of wealth distribution in our country,
Mhm.
right? So we have 1.4 billion people in our country.
Mhm.
Uh, there are only, I think there are barely 20 million people who have mutual fund subscriptions,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
There are barely, I think, 1.5 million people who have AIF PMSs,
Right.
right? So the point I'm driving at is 1% of our population
Mhm.
controls something like 80% of our wealth,
Yeah.
right? Now, that 1% of our population is the moneyed elite.
Mhm.
I somehow can't see the people in, Cuff Parade or Malabar Hill or Banjara Hills or Defense Colony or Vasant Vihar in Delhi
Mhm.
saying, let me trust my crores to this robo advisor,
Mhm.
right? It just doesn't logically make sense. In a European country where everybody is middle class,
Mhm.
in a European country where 80% of the country is middle class,
Mhm.
or even in the context of America, where arguably the middle class is 50-60 million people, you can do your fintech and it might work, right?
Mhm.
Even
Right.
there, the jury is out, but at least there's a theoretical basis for hoping for it.
Mhm.
In our country, you basically have 1.5 million really moneyed people.
Mhm.
Sure, you can go and sell fintech to, young graduates from engineering colleges working in the software sector, but
Mm-hmm.
they're earning a few lakhs. So
Right.
you'll be spending more on writing the code than
Mm.
they'll be spending on paying you fees. So
Right.
fintech in our country has largely been a matter of signing up lots of bright young people
Mm-hmm.
who have very little money. The wealth, unfortunately or fortunately, is conservative, sits in very few hands, and those few hands are older people.
Right.
And therefore, I think the technology solution in India will have to be a different run from
Right.
copy pasting Western technology paradigms in India.
Right, right, right. That human touch in technology is definitely missing within the robo advisory gamut, and I think yeah,
And
that
trust as well, right? So if we
yeah,
had a trust, if our legal and financial system evoked trust, maybe you could do with less human touch. ना तो trust है, ना तो touch है.
hmm,
How on earth will you convince people to give you money?
that's true. That's true. Absolutely. I mean, if you go to any new startups website and you see that they are helping you invest money using a robo advisory platform, unless you actually see backing by some trustworthy institution, you would never even think of investing with them, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's sort of set in stone.
yeah. And then you think about, again, just like we think of normal businesses, think of the barrier to entry.
Hmm.
What barrier to entry will you build as a robo advisor? Why? How do you know the fellow who comes down next week with another VC backing him
Yeah,
will not build a better robo advisor?
that's true. That's true. I mean, we don't understand as investors, we don't really understand technology, and hence we can't really comprehend which one is better than the other. So yeah, I mean
So I have
that
to confess, I don't. So that's certainly true for me. But I'm sure there are bright people
yeah,
from the IITs who do understand technology.
yeah, yeah.
But even if they understand technology and they back the right coding team with the right amount of money,
Hmm.
my point is 3 weeks later there'll be some other coding team with the right amount of money.
That's true.
So how will you prevent them from grabbing your market share?
Right, right, right. That's true, Saurabh. Saurabh, so just one last question, and this is coming from your answer to how reading has helped you focus and cut through the noise. So just in the interest of time, I'll just give one last question, very short. So how do you think it will be good for investors, and how do you think it can be put to practice that people cut through the noise of everyday stock market news, which is non-essential, and focus on the company fundamentals? What are some practical advices that you can give to the people?
Well, look, I mean, the way to think about it is it's a discipline, it's a skill to build. It takes time for the skill of reading in depth to build. So it's a bit like saying, suppose today I wanted to become a yoga practitioner, right? I
Right.
haven't done yoga properly ever. If I
Mhm.
want to become a yoga practitioner, I can do a beginner's course,
Mhm.
right? But it'll take me several years
Yeah.
to build any competence in using yoga, improving my levels of health,
Right.
mental calm, becoming good at meditation, etc.
Mhm.
Right? Similarly with this reading stuff,
Mhm.
right? Begin by doing an hour of solid reading every day.
Mhm.
For some people, even that might be a challenge. So begin by doing half an hour of undisturbed reading every day,
Mhm.
right? Choose a subject that interests you, right? If you start with annual reports, most likely आप सो जाओगे. So start with subject that interests you. So whether it's literature, whether it's sport, whether
Mhm.
it's finance, choose books on a subject that interests you.
Mhm.
Try reading half an hour every day non-stop. फिर धीरे धीरे उसको बढ़ाओ.
Mhm.
And if you can get to a stage where you can read a couple of hours undisturbed every day,
Mhm.
that's when you start switching to material which is linked to investing. That's when you start reading annual reports.
Right.
Gradually cultivate that mental muscle, and if you cultivate it over say 3-4 years, you'll start seeing the benefits. But it's not one of those where you get a gym membership in November
Mhm.
and March तक आपकी body fit हो रही है.
Yeah.
It will take a few years for the
Yeah.
brain to show the effect. Basically, you're making your neural networks denser. You're building mental muscle,
Mhm.
and just like physical muscle, mental muscle will help you stand out.
Mhm.
But it takes a while for that mental muscle to build. The good news is the younger you are, the
Mhm.
quicker this process will work. If you are my age, in the mid 40s, it will take a while longer. It still can be done, right? There's solid research which shows that the brain is elastic. The brain is elastic. The brain is moldable even into our 50s, right?
Yeah.
But it takes longer. If you're in your teens or your 20s, it will work much faster. And if you do it for 5 years, you'll become a superpower. Reading becomes a superpower. And by the time you do it 5 years hence, even fewer people will be reading.
Yeah.
So you'll have even more privileged insights.
Mhm.
You'll be happy to even more privileged insights courtesy your skills in deep reading.
Right.
My latest book, The Victory Project,
Yeah.
my friend Anupam Gupta and I have written a book called The Victory Project. It was published a couple of months back.
Okay.
We've described in depth this process of how do you become a deeper reader, a deeper thinker. What is the step-by-step process to use
Okay.
to
Okay.
juice up your creativity, juice up your effectiveness,
Right.
juice up your reading skills.
Perfect. Perfect. Great, Saurabh. Thank you so much for taking out the time. And
Pleasure. Hopefully you got some useful content from it.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I hope to hear back from you again soon in the future.
ठीक है. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your reaching.